Hi all, welcome back to Make More Bonsai. John here. Summer's ending here in Austin, Texas. The ridiculously hot days are finally behind us here, and it's merely blazing hot in the afternoon, but the cool mornings and evenings that are standard for autumn in this climate make this a good time to set up some trees for next year. Autumn is the time when trees are pulling in resources to pass the winter with an abundance of stored energy for spring. Trunks and branches are fattening as they prep for winter dormancy. There's a kind of shift from expansion above ground to expansion below ground and internally among the branches and trunks. For junipers, however, there is still some continuation of foliage expansion that really only slows down when temperatures are well below freezing. New buds and foliage growth remain active as long as there's some warmth, light, and water. In this Mediterranean-like climate here in Austin, the timing for safely training junipers can extend through autumn. We're going to take advantage of that timing to refine this Shimpaku juniper. This tree is about 17 years old. It was raised from a cutting and has spent its whole life in a pot, with occasional training to define a trunk line and pruning to encourage plenty of choices when the time came for bonsai styling. It was finally potted into a bonsai pot 1 year ago and left to get established in its new environment. If we take a look, we can see there's plenty of new growth and quite a few long runners, indicating that this tree is healthy and adjusted to the new growing conditions. These are indicators that we can move on to some refinement styling. Over that time that it was growing out, the lower branches that were left to extend, that helped to build a strong vascular system in the tree. The increased movement of resources thickened the trunk over time, and when it was looking good, those branches were removed and converted to gin and shari deadwood. The gin and shari that were roughed out in that area has grown over, and the tree has acquired some really attractive features on that lower trunk. In this session, I plan to refine the overall silhouette of the tree and set it on the path to a more mature-looking tree that is more in proportion with the trunk. It's safe to say that this tree has had lots of bonsai training. Because of that, we can relax and dig in and enjoy the process of refinement bonsai styling. Starting with some broad establishing moves, we can get into the mindset of the previous training sessions over the years. Then, as the image becomes more clear, work on refining details. Much like one would approach an alla prima portrait or landscape painting, begin with blocking out major shapes, develop the positive and negative space, then working those shapes and spaces into a more refined profile by working in different areas, refining details with each pass. This is a less methodical approach than, say, designing one branch at a time until you run out of branches, and more of a let's discover what this tree has done since the last time, and what can be done to add value to what it's offering. So let's get our hands dirty and see what we can do. First, I'd like to add more tension to the design by making the angle of the triangular outline more acute. The bottom of the triangle is very level and kind of buries the main story the trunk is telling. Hiding that bottom branch will help confirm this is a good plan. Before completely removing it, I think spending some time cleaning up the branches a little will help better familiarize myself with the tree to see what other opportunities the tree can offer after all of that mess is removed. This is what I mean by blocking out the major shapes and elements of the design. It's about considering the overall design in broad sweeps, removing a little bit at a time. It helps to shake off the mindset of the methodology one can have when a bonsai design is in its early stages. This is a session about refinement from a more artistic point of view. So let's take a closer look at what exactly is going on when cleaning up and pruning the foliage of this juniper. Many junipers, like the Shimpaku, send out buds all over the place. These new buds radiate all around the main runner, as well as along the main branch, and often in the spaces between branches. These new buds and young shoots are reaching for light. A lot of them are useful opportunities to enhance a tree and increase branch ramification, and sometimes end up in places where they aren't able to produce much for the tree. These poor producing shoots can be removed since they're actually pulling energy from the tree, energy that can be better used to support the design. Many of these new growth shoots reside on the underside of a branch. Consider removing them to better enhance the branch silhouette by helping maintain a clean line on the bottom of the branch, which helps separate the branches in the design. Also, removing parallel shoots, alternating them up through the branch will help open the area up for light and air to pass through the foliage, as well as maintaining an overall asymmetrical layout of the ramified branches. A good final profile of the branch would be a series of alternating foliage masses along the sides, with some of the branches left on the top to provide volume when needed in the design. This action also opens up a clear path for wire to be applied to the branches. In this first pass, I'm not removing everything yet, just clearing out what I'm not sure will not benefit the tree or the overall design. Mostly, I'm just identifying what I think will be used and where they reside on the tree to come back to later as the bonsai design becomes more clear. This process for me is very relaxing. It helps ease any pressure one may feel when making design decisions on a tree. These tasks are kind of what makes bonsai, as a practice, pleasant and fun. A repetitive series of motions, much like practicing an instrument or a drawing exercise, can really help focus and sort of make the rest of the world fall away. I really encourage you to enjoy the process and be present in the moment. But enough of this palaver, we've got some bonsaiing to do. After clearing out the excess growth, it's time to commit to the design choice of removing the lowest branch. That branch has been growing out and thickening for years to allow it to put on some weight to have more to offer when it's time to be made into a jin. Let's think about this strategy a bit. Often, jin on bonsai are kind of created all at once. This strategy works on large older trees, and with collected trees from the wild, usually there's plenty of existing area that's been weathered and made beautiful by nature. One can find plenty of wood to work with right away, and really effective and attractive jin can be created during an initial design session. This juniper is not particularly big. Grown in captivity for 17 years, so it hasn't had exposure to a harsh environment. The texture of the dead wood has not had the advantage of decades of exposure to create natural, detailed aging. A tree this size will need some consideration when designing those details. In this case, the gradual creation of jin over time allows some texture to form as new growth grows over that jin. Then adding some more dead wood later kind of artificially enhances the timeline of each jin naturally, and that can help drive the story of the tree. On that older shari, you can see there are some divots and dents. These were healed over scars that were carved into the trunk over time. Every year, a new scar was carved in and allowed to heal over to add to the texture. The trunk then starts to tell a story, and these marks help reinforce that story. This is a long-term way to approach building a bonsai with deadwood. There are quicker ways to artificially age a jin, like setting it on fire for a few seconds, or sandblasting an area, or spraying it with liquid nitrogen to freeze it quickly to expand the water in the branch so it cracks. These are really cool tools to use. I'm choosing to use a plain old pair of pliers to make this jin, however. It's quick and flexible, and for this tree, it's all that's needed to keep us in the moment. Now that the jin is blocked out for the design, let's see if adjusting a few branches will help solidify a direction for this tree. That rightmost branch will need to be raised and brought forward to help harmonize with the jin and the lower trunk. Wires being applied to the primary and secondary branches so they can be adjusted and spread out to allow light to reach the interior and fill in that area with new foliage. Once that's placed into a space, we can re-examine the foliage density and see what we can do about an apex for this tree. I can see this tree has kind of a pointy top. Let's spend some time thinning out the foliage density and look for opportunities as they're revealed. Since there's so much evidence of aging from the jin and shari, I'd like to convey a more aged appearance to the apex to keep it consistent with the overall design. Younger trees will tend to have a defined extension to the top as the tree is still growing and reaching out for light. As it ages and reaches its maximum height, the apex tends to expand outward, rounding out the appearance. To create this illusion of a rounded apex, let's consider how to construct an apex with foliage. I like to think of an apex on a bonsai as a small tree on top of the larger tree. That is to say, it would have a main branch or defining branch, secondary and back branches all combining into the spread out of the top of the tree. So I approach it the same way I do all over the tree. Clean out any unnecessary foliage, then apply wire to the quote-unquote trunk and branches, then place them into position. In this case, I'm identifying the main branch is really what is now pointing up. Then using one of the smaller side branches as the new top. It'll grow out and fill in a more rounded presentation. Once that's wired, it's kind of a redirect of the original trunk down to become the defining main branch of the apex. This will also kind of smush the height profile down a bit, reducing the height and expanding the width of the overall area to help round it out. Then, by wiring the remaining smaller branches and spreading them out to encourage upward growth over a broader area, this will achieve that rounding effect. After setting up the new apex to arrive at a new height for the tree, we can take a few minutes to better refine the new shari now that we have a better idea of the overall look of the tree. I'm using this small, sharp dental tool and tweezers to dig into the wood to dislodge enough to tear some small sections of the wood to add texture. After a few seasons, water will seep in and freeze over winter, and it will more naturally age the gin. On trees this size, small adjustments like this will help reinforce the illusion of scale. It helps create a balanced combination of large and small fissures that look a bit more natural and add depth to the details of the tree. Now, moving on to the main branch on the left, I want to raise it up a bit to better define and expose that lower trunk and also help harmonize with the position of the gin on the tree. I'm also thinning the foliage and spreading out the secondary branches to allow easy access to light. This session will help define which branches will be in the final design for the tree. I want to set up more refined placement for all the primary and secondary branches throughout the tree. The same treatment is being applied to the back branches. They will help frame the gin and shari, as well as help define the overall tree silhouette. These supporting branches will be important since there are very few available branches in front. Now that the main and secondary branches are placed, the rest of the branches can be placed into areas to further support the design. With this final pass through the entire tree with scissors, I'm removing most of the tips that have pointed growth to help realign the hormones within the tree, to encourage the rest of the branches to fill in over the next few seasons of autumn, winter, and next spring. Most of the downward pointing growth is removed. Branches are spread open for new growth to fill in. I've left enough foliage on the tree to keep energy flowing, so there will be plenty of new growth to choose from next year. If too much is removed at this point, it may take longer for the tree to recover, which will slow down the refinement of the final design. Right now, this tree is far too lush to solidify the illusion of a large tree. That final design will see a few more branches removed to better define the structure. Leaving those branches on now only promote health and further development of the tree. To better hit that target of the illusion of a larger tree, we will need better definition of the main branch and apex. When those areas have developed some tighter ramification through some selective pruning next spring, we can re-examine the progress and move toward a more refined bonsai. In this session, we help push this design forward to a better overall profile. The following seasons will demand more attention to the details of foliage development by switching gears from initial design and encouraging more growth to slowing down branch extension to encourage more dense foliage in the right places. This is when the strategic pruning will take place to encourage more internal foliage growth, and a more strict removal of any foliage that does not fit the design or benefit the tree in an effort to gain more fine, upward growing branches with tighter spacing. Thanks for taking the time to meander through this little bonsai with me. I'm looking forward to sharing all the progress it'll make in the coming years. For now, back to the bench to recover and finish up the year for a winter rest and get ready for a very active spring and summer next year. Thanks for watching. I hope you gained some helpful insights from this video. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share or want to add to the conversation, any comments would be greatly appreciated, and it'll help pass the time until this tree is ready for more fun. While you're at it, maybe like and subscribe, or possibly check out the book or the t-shirt links, and there's also like a hat, in the comments below, because bonsai stuff is kind of cool, and so are you for helping support this channel.